In the heart of Nyandarua County, nestled between the green hills and whispering winds, lies a place often forgotten by the maps of ambition, Kipipiri Wanjohi village. Life there doesn't hand out dreams easily. You have to fight for them with muddy feet, empty stomachs, and a hopeful heart. That's where my story begins. I was born on a chilly morning in Kipipiri, where the mist rises early and the soil is as rich as the stories carried by old folks sitting by the fire. My childhood was a beautiful paradox, full of life yet marred by struggle. We didn't have much. In fact, basic needs often felt like luxury items. A good meal, a pair of shoes without holes, or a warm sweater were not everyday blessings. They were rewards for surviving another week. My parents were humble farmers, the kind who tilled the land with their hands and watered it with their prayers. Education, they believed, was the one inheritance they could afford, so off I went to Satima Primary School, armed with torn books, determination, and a stubborn refusal to let poverty define me. Each day started early. Before the rooster could clear his throat, I'd walk several kilometers past muddy paths and whispering fields, often barefoot, carrying a heart full of dreams. Sometimes I studied with an empty stomach, sometimes in the dark when kerosene ran out, but I was always burning inside with hunger, not just for food, but for a future. And somehow, I made it through. Against all odds, I passed my KCPE and joined Kipipiri High School. It wasn't fancy. It didn't have the polished floors or fancy labs you'd see on TV, but it was where I learned the power of grit. In high school, I knew suffering by name. School fees were an ongoing struggle, meals were rationed, and books were shared. But through it all, I held on to one thing: hope. I told myself, you're not going to remain here, you're going to rise. And rise I did. Straight to Multimedia University of Kenya, where I began my degree in applied physics and computer science. It was supposed to be the peak of my youth, a celebration of overcoming. But life had other plans. It was during my campus days that meningitis crept into my life like a thief in the night. What began as a strange headache and fever ended in the diagnosis that changed everything: monoplegia, a condition that paralyzed my left side. Suddenly, my legs couldn't obey me like they used to. My world spun. My identity, built on independence and determination, began to crack. Imagine being 21 in the prime of your life, and now needing help just to walk, to rise from a chair. Friends distanced themselves. Lectures became painful marathons. Strangers stared. Some whispered, others mocked. I cried. A lot. Not just from pain, but from shame, confusion, and frustration. Why me? I asked. I remember lying on my hostel bed, staring at the ceiling, drowning in thoughts darker than night. But somehow, I found strength. Not from outside, but from within. After contracting meningitis in my second year at Multimedia University, everything came to a halt. My dreams, which had once soared like eagles, suddenly crumbled into silence. I couldn't walk, I couldn't sit without help, and I couldn't return to class. My world shifted from lecture halls and assignments to hospital beds and tear-filled nights. I returned home, not as the son who left with dreams, but as a young man fighting for his life. The door to our small home in Kipipiri didn't just welcome me back, it embraced me with quiet sorrow. Suddenly, my family's life changed forever. My mother became my nurse, bathing me, feeding me, turning me over at night so I wouldn't bruise. My father, once a strong figure who believed that men should be tough, became the silent warrior behind me. He rarely said much, but the pain etched in his eyes told stories words could never write. My brothers and sisters, young, hopeful, and bright, had to watch their big brother become a shadow of who he was. We were no longer just fighting poverty or distance from opportunity. We were now fighting for my life. Some days, I felt like a burden. I saw how tired my mother looked. I heard the prayers whispered at dawn and the sobs she thought we didn't hear at night. My siblings had to become adults far too early, taking care of chores, fetching water, and holding my hand when it trembled uncontrollably from the pain. But even in the darkest valley, God was not silent. Slowly, strength started to return. Not much, but enough to sit up without support. Enough to feel sunlight on my face and not just through a window. I started to read again. I started to believe again. By the second year after falling ill, I had enough strength to return to school. The second year brought with it a miracle. Energy. Not much, just a flicker, but enough to make me sit up, breathe in the cold air of Wanjohi, and whisper to myself, maybe, just maybe, this isn't how the story ends. I'll never forget that morning. My mother came into the room, as she always did, with warm water, a basin, and a quiet prayer on her lips. But that day something was different. I asked her to hand me the towel, not because I could do much with it, but because I wanted to try. She stopped, eyes wide, then smiled with a tear sliding down her cheek. You're coming back to us, Mwana Wanina. Regaining my strength was like learning to walk on broken glass. Every step was painful, physically, emotionally, spiritually, but I had unfinished business. My degree at Multimedia University was on pause, but my dreams hadn't paused with it. I knew I had to go back, not just for myself, but for every young person from Kipipiri, every child whose legs worked, but whose hope was paralyzed by poverty, pain, or powerlessness. So I packed my books, my hope, and my fear, and I went back to Nairobi. Returning to university after being away felt like walking into a movie you'd paused halfway through. Except now, the character was changed. I wasn't just Ephantus the student, I was Ephantus the fighter, the survivor, the one walking with a limp and a lesson. People stared, some avoided me, others pitied me. A few offered genuine support, but I wasn't looking for sympathy. I was chasing destiny. Navigating lecture halls, hostels, and crowded corridors on one strong leg was a challenge, but I found rhythm in the chaos. I learned how to fall with grace and rise with purpose. I started helping other students, with assignments, with ideas, with encouragement. I wasn't the same student they remembered. I had become a walking message that your body might break, but your will must never. Returning to campus wasn't a victory parade. It was a slow, painful crawl back into a world that had moved on without me. I was no longer just a student. I was a survivor navigating lecture halls, hostels, and crowded corridors with one strong leg and a will of steel. Each step across the dusty streets of Rongai felt like a marathon. My body ached. My pride often ached more. Unlike my peers, I couldn't live in the campus hostels due to my condition. I had to rent outside, which meant long walks to and from class, rain or shine. Imagine trying to beat the 7 a.m. class rush, limping through a sea of moving bodies, while others zoomed past you on bodas or on foot with ease. But I found rhythm in the chaos. I learned how to fall with grace and rise with purpose. Falling became less about the pain and more about how fast I could get back up. And with every stumble, I became stronger, not just in body but in soul. People often looked at me and expected pity, but I gave them strength instead. I started helping fellow students, explaining assignments, sharing resources, offering encouragement. I wasn't just back, I was transformed. I had become a walking message. Your body might break, but your will must never. But even with this inner strength, life wasn't easy. My mother worried constantly. My family was unsure how I would survive campus life on my own. And honestly, sometimes I wondered the same. There were days I felt like I was carrying a mountain, and all I had were bare feet. Still, amid the storm, I found hands that held me up. Friends, true angels in disguise. One friend in particular walked so closely with me that to this day, people think we are siblings. She cooked for me, washed my clothes, helped with therapy, and made sure I had food even on the days I couldn't afford it. She didn't see me as a burden, though I sometimes felt like one. She just saw someone worth fighting for. That sacrifice pushed me to hustle. I didn't want to just say, I wanted to feel. I started small. I remember standing at the bar with strangers, jumping lectures and listening. I felt like I was rebuilding my future one step at a time. In her enthusiasm, she reminded me of the simple joys in life. It's amazing how the smallest interactions can turn your day around.